The blinding white light of the operating room sears my eyes as I lie strapped to the cold steel table. My heart monitor ticks louder, faster, like a drum announcing my own execution. The nurse lifts a syringe, its clear liquid gleaming, and I know in seconds I'll be put under. I tell myself this is my duty as a mother. I must give my kidney to save my son. But why does it feel like I'm walking willingly into a trap? And then bang, the doors slam open. A rush of cold air rattles the metal trays. My 9-year-old grandson bursts into the room, his sneakers muddy, his little chest heaving as he shouts with every ounce of his courage, "Grandma, don't. I know why Dad really needs your kidney." The entire room freezes. The doctors stare. My daughter-in-law pounds on the glass in panic. And me, I lie there paralyzed, knowing that the secret about to be revealed could destroy my family forever. If you're watching this, don't look away. Like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're hearing my story, because what I'm about to confess may be the most shocking truth you've ever heard about a family. **** Before that day in the operating room, my life was nothing more than a small circle of sacrifices and quiet routines. I lived in a modest house in Ballard, a neighborhood tucked against Seattle's cold waters. Mornings always began the same. The smell of coffee drifting through the kitchen, the squeak of my husband Joel's wheelchair as I pushed him to the back porch for a breath of damp Pacific air. His eyes were often lost, his words few, but I still held his hand as though he might come back to me fully if I just loved him hard enough. I spent my days selling produce at the Pike Place Market. The scent of salt and fish, the bright flash of fresh oranges, the chatter of tourists, it was the rhythm of my survival. In the evenings, I would sew by the dim light of a yellow lamp, my fingers calloused from needle and thread, while the radio hummed quietly in the background. My sons were the reason I never stopped. Aiden, my oldest, was strong, loud, the kind of man who filled a room with laughter. And Logan, my younger one, steady and loyal, always showing up at my door with a bag of groceries or a broken tool he insisted on fixing. For years, I told myself I was blessed, even when the nights grew long and my body ached. I believed my family was unbreakable. But cracks have a way of showing in the places you least expect. It began with Aiden's cough, small at first, then heavier, like his lungs were carrying bricks. He brushed it off, said it was just the long hours at construction. But his face grew pale, his shoulders slumped, and once, when he came home, he whispered that he had blood in his urine. I felt the ground shift beneath me, but he only smiled weakly, telling me not to worry. Then came Sabrina. She swept into Aiden's life like a cool breeze through an open window, beautiful, polished, her voice honeyed with care. At first, I thought she was a blessing, the answer to my son's pain. She cooked, she brought him pills right on time. She whispered reassurances that everything would be fine. Neighbors said I was lucky to have such a devoted daughter, and I wanted to believe them. But sometimes I caught her staring at me with eyes colder than the Seattle rain, eyes that didn't match her sweet words. And one night, as I carried Joel's dinner to the porch, I heard her outside in the dark, her voice low, and hurried into the phone. "Don't worry, everything is going according to plan." My hand froze on the doorknob, my heart skipped a beat. When I asked her who she was talking to, she laughed nervously, said it was just a friend. But from that night on, I couldn't shake the chill that crept up my spine. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was imagining things. But deep down, I knew IE was standing at the edge of something terrible, and I was about to fall. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, though nothing about it felt ordinary once it began. The smell of tomato soup simmering in my small kitchen filled the house when Sabrina walked in without knocking. Her heels clicked sharply against the linoleum floor, each step like a warning. She didn't smile, didn't greet me. She just stood there with her arms crossed, her eyes sharp enough to cut glass. "The doctors ran the tests," she said flatly. "Your kidney is the only one that matches. It's your responsibility now. You have to save him." The wooden spoon slipped from my fingers and clattered into the pot, splashing soup onto the stove. My throat went dry. "Of course I'll do anything for Aiden," I whispered, but even to my own ears, my voice sounded weak, uncertain. Sabrina's lips curved in kindness, but in triumph. "Good," she said, spinning on her heel as if the matter was settled. 10 minutes later, her parents arrived. Richard Hayes walked in as though my house belonged to him, his cologne overpowering the scent of soup. Elaine, his wife, followed close behind in a tailored coat, her gaze as cold as the Seattle wind that whistled through the cracks of my old windows. They didn't ask to sit, they simply took the two best chairs in the living room. A mother's duty, Richard said, clearing his throat with the authority of a man used to being obeyed. It's not optional. It's what any decent parent would do. Elaine leaned forward, her manicured nails tapping against the armrest. If you refuse, what will the neighbors think? That you let your son die, that you aren't worthy of being called his mother. Her words sliced me open. I gripped the edge of the table to keep from trembling. And then Aiden shuffled in, thin as a shadow, his body propped on the arm of the sofa. He reached for my hand, his palm icy cold. "Mom," he whispered, his voice no stronger than a breath. "I trust you. You'll save me, won't you?" His eyes, once so full of laughter, now clouded with exhaustion and pleading, locked onto mine. My heart twisted. How could I say no? How could I deny him when he was looking at me as if I was his last hope? I nodded, but the room suddenly felt smaller. The walls pressing in, the smell of medicinal herbs from Joel's untouched soup on the porch choking me. That night, when the house finally grew quiet, I sat by Joel's wheelchair, my hands folded in my lap, my chest heavy with dread. He looked at me with his distant, hollow gaze, and I wanted to ask him, am I doing the right thing, or am I letting them push me into a grave? But Joel just blinked, silent as ever, and I realized no answer would come. In that suffocating silence, I knew one thing. I had been cornered, and the only way out was through a sacrifice I wasn't sure I could survive. Asterisk. The days that followed were a blur of forced smiles and restless nights. I woke before dawn, carried crates of apples and onions to the market, sewed late into the night beneath the dim glow of a crooked lamp. On the outside, my life looked unchanged, but inside, my chest was tight with an unease I couldn't name. It was Milo, my sweet, wide-eyed grandson, who cracked the silence first. One afternoon, he sat on the floor of my kitchen, pushing his toy car back and forth without his usual laughter. His little brow was furrowed, his voice barely above a whisper when he asked, "Grandma, what if my dad isn't sick from work? What if someone is making him sick on purpose?" The words hit me like a slap. I nearly dropped the plate in my hands. "Why would you say that, Milo?" I asked, trying to sound calm, but my heart was hammering. He shrugged, eyes still on the toy car. "I heard Mom talking on the phone. She said something about medicine, and she didn't sound nice." I forced a smile, ruffled his hair. "Don't worry, sweetheart. I'm sure she was just talking to the doctor." But the smile I gave him felt fake even to me, and Milo didn't smile back. He just stared, as if he knew I was hiding something. That night, the unease grew. I walked into the hospital room to find Sabrina at Aiden's bedside, tilting a glass of water just as he swallowed a pill. I almost missed it, the quick flick of her wrist, the way she slipped the small blue tablet from her palm into the glass. "What's that?" I asked sharply. She jumped, nearly spilling the water. Then, with a quick, forced smile, she said, "Just the supplement the doctor prescribed for his kidney function." But later, when I cornered Dr. Patel, she frowned as she scanned the chart. "No new supplements," she said firmly. "Everything he needs is already listed here." Her words sank like stones into my stomach. I walked down the sterile hospital hallway, the scent of disinfectant stinging my nose, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold on to my purse. That night, when I closed my eyes, I could still see the gleam of that blue pill and hear Milo's innocent voice asking, "What if someone is making him sick on purpose?" For the first time, I allowed myself to wonder, was I truly saving my son, or was I feeding him straight into the hands of something far darker? The more I tried to convince myself I was imagining things, the more reality refused to let me rest. One evening, Logan showed up at my door, his work shirt stained with grease, his eyes dark with worry. He pulled out his phone, swiping until he stopped at a series of grainy photos. My stomach turned cold. There was Sabrina, in the hospital parking garage, her hair pulled back tightly, a scarf covering half her face. She was handing a small white bag to a man in a black jacket and baseball cap. The man passed her an envelope in return. "Mom," Logan whispered, his jaw tight. I followed her. She didn't see me. "These aren't prescriptions. She's moving something, and hiding it." I stared at the photos, my hands trembling so violently I nearly dropped the phone. "No," I murmured, though my voice cracked. "She wouldn't, she couldn't," but Logan's face told me otherwise. That night, Milo came over clutching his battered backpack. His cheeks were flushed, his little hands shaking as he pulled out an old cell phone with a cracked screen. "Grandma," he said, his voice quivering but determined. I found this on Mom's dresser. I listened. He pressed play. Sabrina's voice filled the room, low and hurried. After the transplant, the data will be perfect. Don't worry. That old woman won't dare refuse. The words stabbed through me like knives. My breath hitched, my knees gave way, and I collapsed into the chair, covering my mouth with both hands. Milo's eyes filled with tears, but he kept his voice steady. Grandma, she's hurting Dad. I know she is. I wanted to deny it, to protect his innocence, to protect myself. But the puzzle pieces were falling together, no matter how hard I tried to scatter them. The blue pills, the fake supplement, the photos in the garage, and now this recording. I looked at Milo, at Logan, and at the shadows stretching long across the kitchen walls. My family's safety, my son's very life, everything was unraveling right in front of me, and yet, tomorrow morning, the hospital still expected me to sign the final consent papers. My hands shook as I whispered into the silence. Am I saving Aiden, or helping them kill him? Asterisk, asterisk, the morning they came for me, Seattle was wrapped in a damp fog that clung to the windows like a warning. I hadn't slept all night. The recording of Sabrina's voice looped endlessly in my head, every word a nail driving deeper into my chest. And yet, when the knock came at my door, I felt too weak to resist. Sabrina was there, her coat immaculate, her smile stretched tight like a mask. Behind her stood Richard and Elaine, dressed as though they were heading to a business meeting, not a hospital. Richard carried a leather briefcase. Elaine wore a red silk scarf that glowed like a streak of blood in the pale light. Today's the day, Sabrina said softly, but her tone left no room for doubt. She laid a stack of medical papers on my dining table, the sharp scent of ink rising from the pages. Sin, Evelyn, your son doesn't have time for hesitation. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the pen. I glanced at the signature line, my name already printed beneath it, waiting like a gravestone. I thought of Milo's frightened eyes, of Logan's photos, of the unlabeled bottle hidden under a napkin. Every fiber of me screamed to stop, but Aiden's face, gaunt, pale, pleading, rose in my mind. And guilt pressed me down like a weight I couldn't lift. The pen scratched across the page. My signature bled onto the paper like an execution order. Within the hour, I was lying on a gurney, being wheeled out of my own house by paramedics. The cold straps dug into my arms as the wheels squeaked over the cracked sidewalk. I clutched a small fabric bag against my chest. The only thing I had grabbed, a change of clothes and an old embroidered handkerchief from my wedding day. The ambulance. Doors slammed shut, sealing me inside. Sirens wailed, slicing through the fog as we sped down the wet street. Red and blue lights flickered against the windows, staining the gray morning in violent colors. I closed my eyes, but all I could see was the reflection of Sabrina in the rearview mirror. Seated across from me, her lips curled in the faintest smile. It wasn't the smile of relief, it was the smile of someone who had already won. The gurney rattled beneath me, each bump on the road driving home the truth. I was no longer walking toward salvation. I was being delivered, helpless, strapped down straight into the hands of something far darker, and deep inside, I knew this ambulance wasn't carrying me to save my son's life. It was carrying me straight into the heart of a nightmare I might never return from. Asterisk, asterisk. The operating room was colder than I imagined. So cold it felt like ice seeping straight into my bones. The moment they wheeled me under the surgical lights, I had to squint. Their glare was merciless. A white sun that erased everything else. Breathe slowly, a nurse murmured, her gloved hands fastening straps tighter across my arms. The leather dug into my skin, reminding me that I was no longer in control. On the other side of the glass, I saw them. Sabrina, standing tall with her arms folded, her gaze never leaving me. Her mother, Elaine, beside her, lips pressed into a smug line, as if this were a performance they had choreographed long ago. Richard adjusted his tie, talking quietly to someone in a white coat, as if he were closing a business deal. My chest rose and fell in shallow gasps. This isn't medicine, I thought. This is a transaction, and I am the currency. Dr. Patel, her voice calm but grave, leaned over me. Mrs. Cotter, we need your signature before we begin. She slid the clipboard closer, a pen attached by a string. My fingers trembled violently as I reached for it. The sound of my own pulse pounded in my ears, louder than the steady beep, beep of the monitor. I stared at the blank line, my name printed neatly beneath it, waiting like a tombstone inscription. Through the glass, Sabrina gave a small nod, her lips silently forming the words, "Do it, now." I swallowed hard, my throat so dry it burned. With every ounce of will, I pressed the pen to the page. The ink bled across the paper in a shaky scrawl that looked nothing like my handwriting. It felt less like signing a form, and more like signing my own death sentence. "Good," Dr. Patel said softly. Signaling the team, a nurse picked up the syringe. The liquid inside shimmered under the surgical light like liquid silver. I tried to take a deep breath, but it felt like my lungs were filled with stones. I wanted to scream, to rip the straps from my arms, to run, but my body wouldn't move. And then, just as the needle's tip grazed the skin of my arm, the doors of the operating room burst open with a metallic crash. A rush of cold air swept through, rattling the tray of instruments. Every head in the room jerked toward the sound. I forced my eyes open, my breath caught in my throat. Something or someone had broken through. Asterisk, asterisk. The crash of the doors still echoed through the sterile white room when a blur of motion shot past the nurses. A small figure burst inside muddy sneakers squeaking against the tile, wrinkled school uniform clinging to his thin frame. His little chest heaved with desperate breaths, but his eyes burned with something far too fierce for a child his age. "Milo," I whispered, my voice cracking. Before anyone could stop him, he planted himself beside the operating table, clutching an old phone with a cracked screen as though it were a weapon. His voice trembled but rang out so clear it silenced the machines themselves. "Grandma, don't let them do it. I know why Dad really needs your kidney." The room froze. Nurses exchanged bewildered glances. Dr. Patel lifted her hand, halting the anesthesiologist mid. The syringe hovered in the air, a single droplet trembling on the needle's tip. Behind the glass, Sabrina's mask of calm shattered. Her fists pounded against the window, her scream shrill and panicked. "Don't listen to him. He's just a child. Do you hear me? He doesn't know anything." But her eyes told a different story. They were wide with fear. Darting between Milo's face and the phone clutched in his hand, Dr. Patel's voice cut through the tension, steady but edged with steel. "Whatever you have to say, son, say it now." I tried to lift my head, the straps biting into my arms, my body refusing to obey. My heart thundered, each beat like a fist against my ribs. All I could do was look at Milo, this fragile boy who had once sat in my lap while I read him bedtime stories. Now he stood taller than his small frame, carrying the weight of a truth that could shatter us all. Milo's knuckles turned white as he gripped the phone tighter. His lips trembled, but his eyes never left mine. In that gaze, I saw both his fear and his courage, colliding like lightning in a storm. And in that moment, as the entire operating room held its breath, I realized the scalpel hovering over me was nothing compared to the blade of the secret my grandson was about to unsheath. Asterisk. Milo's small thumb hovered over the cracked screen of his phone. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the relentless beep of my heart monitor. My chest rose and fell in shallow bursts, every nerve in my body screaming for the truth and dreading it all the same. Then he pressed play. A hiss of static filled the silence, followed by a low, hurried voice I knew all too well. "Sabrina. Double quotes after the transplant. The test results will be perfect. Don't worry, that old woman won't dare refuse. This data is worth more than her life." The words sliced through the sterile air, sharper than any scalpel. Gasps erupted from the nurses. One of the surgeons dropped a pair of forceps. The metallic clang against the floor rang like a gunshot. My pulse spiked so violently, the monitor shrieked, the sound piercing the silence. I turned my head, straining against the straps, and saw Sabrina on the other side of the glass. Her face had gone pale, her lips pulled back in a snarl as she pounded the window with both fists. "Lies. He's lying. That's fake." Her voice cracked, high and hysterical, but her eyes betrayed her. They darted, wild and cornered, like a fox caught in a trap. Dr. Patel's jaw tightened. Her hand rose in a commanding gesture. "Stop all preparations. Right now." The anesthesiologist froze, lowering the syringe with trembling fingers. Milo's voice wavered, but he didn't stop. He lifted the phone again. "There's more." Another recording played, this time Elaine's voice, comb cold, deliberate. "Once we have the transplant data, we can move it overseas. Don't worry, no one will question a grieving mother." My breath caught, my vision blurred with tears. The woman who had sat in my living room sipping tea and lecturing me about duty, her voice now twisted into something monstrous. Behind the glass, Elaine staggered back, her hand clutching her pearl necklace, but the mask of composure shattered. Richard gripped her arm, his lips moving in frantic whispers. The room itself seemed to shake under the weight of the truth. Milo looked at me, his small chest rising and falling, his eyes shining with tears. He was too brave to let fall. "Grandma," he whispered. "They were never trying to save Dad. They were using him." My heart clenched so hard it felt like it would rip apart inside me. For months I had doubted, feared, tried to silence the voice inside me that screamed something was wrong. And now, in the blinding light of this room, the truth stood naked before everyone. The family I had once trusted had turned my son into an experiment, and they had almost turned me into their final sacrifice. Asterisk, asterisk. The operating room was no longer a place of healing. It had become a courtroom, a battlefield, a stage where every lie was about to collapse. The doors slammed open again, and Logan stormed in. His shirt was still stained with grease, his chest heaving, his eyes bloodshot with rage. "Enough," he bellowed, his voice booming over the frantic beeping of my heart monitor. "I won't let you butcher my mother for your filthy plan." He shoved past a stunned nurse and planted himself between me and the surgical team. His fists trembled at his sides, his body shaking with fury barely held in check. On the other side of the glass, Sabrina shrieked, "Get him out. He has no right." But Logan cut her off, his voice like thunder. "No right? You poisoned my brother. You lied to my mother. And you thought you could turn this hospital into your laboratory." He snatched Milo's phone from the boy's hand and raised it high. "We have the proof. Your voice. Your mother's voice. You're finished, Sabrina." The staff gasped. One nurse stumbled back, nearly dropping a tray. Dr. Patel's eyes burned with controlled fury. "This isn't just malpractice," she said, her tone as sharp as a scalpel. "This is criminal." She turned to a junior nurse. "Call security, and call the police. Now." The words fell like a hammer. Sabrina's face twisted, her hands clawing at the glass. "Don't you dare! You don't understand. I was doing this for Aiden, for research, for something greater than any of you." Her voice cracked, shrill and desperate. Elaine tried to step forward, her pearls rattling against her chest. "We did what had to be done for the family's future. Don't judge us." But Logan slammed his fist on the observation window so hard the glass shuddered. "Future? You nearly killed my mother and condemned my brother. That's not family, that's evil." The room vibrated with a storm of emotions. The nurses murmured in disbelief. The anesthesiologist lowered the syringe, hands shaking uncontrollably. The heart monitor next to me screamed faster, mirroring my terror and my relief as the truth surged into daylight. Suddenly, heavy footsteps pounded in the hallway. The door swung open once more, this time revealing 2 hospital security guards, followed by uniformed officers. Their radios crackled, their expressions grim. "Step away from the patient," one officer barked. His hand hovered near his holster as his eyes locked on Sabrina, Elaine, and Richard. "This operating room is now under investigation." For the first time, Sabrina faltered. Her fist slid down the glass, her eyes darting wildly as the color drained from her face. Richard tried to whisper something to her, but the words died in his throat. Elaine's lips trembled, her false composure cracking into silent horror. And me? I lay strapped to the table, tears streaming freely down my temples. For the first time in months, I felt the crushing weight on my chest lift, because justice had finally stepped into the room. But I also knew this was far from over. Asterisk, asterisk. The operating room door slammed shut behind the officers, sealing in the chaos. Sabrina thrashed as the guards grabbed her arms, her screams slicing through the sterile air. "Let me go. I was saving him," she shrieked, kicking against the tile. Her hair came loose, her face twisted in desperation. "You don't understand. It was for the research, for the future." Elaine tried to lunge forward, her pearl necklace snapping as one officer blocked her path. "This is a mistake. We did nothing wrong," she cried, her voice breaking, no longer sharp but brittle. Richard stood frozen, his briefcase slipping from his hands, papers spilling across the floor like secrets finally set free. Logan's voice cut through the uproar, raw and trembling with fury. "You were never saving Aiden. You were killing him one pill at a time." He turned to the officers, pointing at Sabrina with a shaking finger. "Arrest them, all of them. They don't deserve another breath outside these walls." The officers pulled Sabrina's wrists behind her back. Metal cuffs clicked shut with a finality that echoed like thunder. She twisted her neck, eyes locking on me. For the first time, I saw fear, not arrogance, not calculation, just raw, naked fear. "You'll regret this," Evelyn, she spat, her voice cracking. Without me, your son is as good as dead. I flinched, but before I could respond, another voice broke the silence, weak, trembling, yet cutting straight to my heart. Mom, what is she talking about? Aiden. They wheeled him in from the adjacent prep room, his hospital gown hanging loose on his frail frame. His face was pale, his eyes sunken, but the confusion and betrayal in his gaze were sharper than any knife. I reached out instinctively, tears spilling down my cheeks. Aiden, my voice shattered. You don't know what they've done to you. He shook his head slowly, disbelief carving lines across his face. Sabrina, she's been by my side every day. She said she was helping me. She said she loved me. His voice cracked on the last word. Sabrina twisted in the officer's grip, her face contorted with rage. I did love you, but love isn't enough. You were our proof, our key. You were worth more sick than healthy. Aiden staggered back, his foreline trembling in his arm. His breath came in broken sobs. You poisoned me. His words fell into the room like stones into still water, rippling outward, leaving only silence. I wanted to hold him, to shield him from the truth, but all I could do was watch as his world crumbled. My heart broke, knowing the betrayal would scar him deeper than the illness ever had. Dr. Patel stepped forward, her voice steady, resolute. He's not beyond saving. With proper treatment, dialysis, new medication, he can fight this. What matters now is that the poisoning stops. The officers began marching, Sabrina, Elaine, and Richard out, their protests dissolving into the sterile hall. The sound of Sabrina's heels scraping the floor, the clink of her handcuffs, faded like the last notes of a cruel symphony. The room was left in fragments, surgical instruments scattered, papers littering the floor, monitors still beeping a steady, haunting rhythm. And in the middle of it all, I lay on the table, tears streaking my cheeks. Relief and devastation warred inside me. My family was shattered, my son broken, my trust obliterated. Yet, somewhere in that wreckage, a small ember of hope flickered, because for the first time in months, I wasn't strapped down to die. I was free. Asterisk, asterisk. The hospital was quieter the next morning, but the silence felt heavy, like the stillness after a storm has ripped through and left only debris behind. The headlines were already everywhere. Pharmaceutical trafficking ring exposed inside local hospital. Family arrested for poisoning. Exploiting patient. Sabrina, Elaine, and Richard's names were plastered across the news, their photographs grim and grainy as they were led away in handcuffs. The neighbors whispered. The community gasped. Justice had finally stepped in, but justice was not enough to erase the wounds. Aiden lay in a recovery ward, pale but alive. His eyes were swollen from tears, but when I entered the room, he reached for my hand like a child again. Mom, he whispered, his voice breaking. I was blind. I let her hurt me. I let her hurt you. I stroked his hair, feeling both the frailty of his body and the weight of his shame. No, son, I said softly. Love blinds us all sometime. What matters is that you're still here. You still have a life to fight for. And we still have each other. Logan stood at the foot of the bed, his broad shoulders stiff but his eyes softened. For the first time in years, I saw the two brothers exchange a look not of rivalry, but of shared pain and silent promise. A family fractured was trying, in its fragile way, to become whole again. And Milo, the brave boy who had carried the truth on his tiny shoulders, crawled into my lap that evening, his face pressed into my chest, his voice muffled but steady. Grandma, I was scared, but I couldn't let them take you. I hugged him tightly, feeling his heartbeat against mine. You saved me, Milo. You saved us all. That night, back in my quiet house, I sat beneath the flickering lamp with my old diary open. My hands trembled as I wrote. Blood doesn't always make a family. Truth does. Courage does. And sometimes the smallest voice can carry the heaviest truth. I looked up at the window, the moonlight spilling across the yard. For the first time in months, I felt the air in my lungs come freely. And now, to you watching this, listening to me pour out the darkest chapter of my life, I want to leave you with this. When the people closest to you demand your silence, that's when you must speak the loudest. When you feel cornered, remember that fear is exactly what chains you. And when life pushes you to the edge, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say, no more. Because family isn't defined by those who share your blood. It's defined by those who fight for your life, who protect you when you are powerless, who refuse to let lies destroy you. So I ask you, if you were in my place, would you have signed? Would you have gone through with it? Or would you have dared to risk everything to stop the knife? Tell me in the comments, because your voice matters more than you think. Somewhere out there, another mother, another son, another child might need the courage of your words to survive. And remember this: storms always pass, but the truth always finds a way to shine through.